Well, Mrs. ETR kind of had a spiffy idea, and that was that I would maybe shoot some day in the life of. Because when I report to you guys, the board of directors, every weekend or every other weekend, you don't see what goes on in between. And there's quite a bit, and some of it's fun and would be of interest. So I'll be doing that. Now, I won't be doing everything in my life because some of that's just not appropriate for young families, but might go under the guise of marital counseling. Cut that out, that part.
Well, ETR Nation, I did want to catch you up. I did not buy this piece of equipment last week at the auction in Georgia. I seriously considered it. This is called a material handler. The manufacturer is Liebauer, and it's based on a 942 excavator. Where's Waldo? Waldo's World. He did a report on these, and this machine's a lot like that, except for it's got an elevated cab and it's got a long reach arm. That would be ideal for unloading steel coil, which is why we're looking at this kind of equipment. You might be thinking, why would a railroad be looking at a piece of equipment like this? Well, as we move towards transload, specifically steel, this machine would be very, very good for lifting coil out of gondolas. This is a coil, sometimes called a slinky. It's called rod coil. It's basically wire that's shipped in a coil like this. When it's straightened out, it's made into all kind of things. Bolts, fencing, anything that could be made out of steel. It's drawn, it's reduced in size, it's worked. But when it comes in, it is in a slinky. The question is, how could we, with the productivity and safety required, unload these? So that's what I've kind of spent the last 2 weeks doing, along with some sales calls. These are coils in a gondola, which is how they're normally shipped. This is the same amount of coils, but in two different size gondola. So maybe we'll zoom in on that and you can see how they're placed in there. They're not secured down. Gravity holds them in that one on the top. They're stacked fairly high. But the question is how to get them out without spending a lot of money and time. Now, this is one way, but I don't like it because it lifts one coil at a time with straps. You got to have a guy in the car. This could be done if you had to unload a car to repair the car, but as a productivity, a production way of doing it, no. This isn't very good. It could be done this way, but we've got to do better than that. We got to be more productive and safer. This is another way. A couple of you guys commented on these, sometimes called a straddle lift, a boat lift. What I don't like is as you move, the stuff swings back and forth. Anything suspended by a cable gets the pendulum effect. So these plates that they show on that beam there, you'd have to be pretty careful or you'd be swinging those plates all around. Maybe a good way to do it, not fast. Here's the best. This is called a material handler. This one's wheeled. The other one that we looked at was tracks, but look at the reach on that. So if you could unload out of a car with this, you could reach right over and put it on the tractor trailers, never set it on the ground, and not handle it with a fork truck, right out of the gondola with this. Well, how would you pick up a slinky with this without putting somebody in the car? Well, you'd use a magnet. Now, this, by the way, is the way the Canadians have drawn it up in their manual. I really wish this was done in the U.S. because look how easy those would be to pick off there with a fork truck. Then a fork truck would be the preferred method. But in the U.S., they're in gondolas facing long ways with the rail car. So you can't get them with a fork truck. You got to pull them out. Most people use straps. But looky here. In today's episode, we're using a magnet. This whole adventure is about, most of this adventure is about, can we do this with a magnet? And I'm going to show you why. Well, I'll let you wait and see how it turned out. Why the way we were doing it may not have been the best. But let's get right at it. Thanks for joining me today. 2 weeks in the life of the ETR.
So we're back today with the day in the life of, and I told you I was going to get this generator running. That's part of the project of seeing if the magnet will lift the coil. So watch this. This thing hasn't run in maybe 3 years, but 2 years at least. There was some wiring damage. I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to show you this thing started like it had just run 5 minutes ago. Stand by. Let me get the camera reversed and we'll go to work. So this thing runs off of the tank of the truck, and it runs off the battery of the truck. So I had to reconnect the main cable that comes back. That goes right here on the solenoid. But I still had no key or start button. Well, it turns out that this wire, which was broken and laying off to the side, is the hot wire. You can see it's coming off of the main battery lead. Anyway, when I touch this to here, watch this thing start. There's a fuel shutoff switch there somewhere, but what I just did was use the bottom of this penetrating oil can to completely eliminate any air going in. So I just starved it and it shut off. So we now have the diesel running, the generator spinning. Let's go back and see what I've got going on at the other end. Now, as I look closely at this, we didn't pull this apart and damage it. The wire's folded over and this is taped up. So I'm glad that we did that. And then it was tucked under there and this whole thing bolted down to protect it. So when we stopped using the magnet, when that one job is done, we put this away appropriately, and I'm happy about that. So while I was waiting for my phone to charge, which was why that wasn't videoed originally, that engine starting up, I brought the grapple around. What you do is you grab the magnet so that you can turn it like you would a grapple. And then this chain has got to go right up in there so that even if you inadvertently let go of the grapple, the magnet doesn't drop. So I'm going to hook that up, hook the chain up in there. Then, remember I showed you right up here was where the magnet ties in. Here's the cable from the magnet. So I'm going to strip these back and wire nut it together, restart the generator, and see if we have magnetism. I know some of you guys have got magnetic personalities. I could have you guys here lifting coils, but I'm going to try it with this Walker magnet. Stand by. I'm going to wire nut those cables together. Now, what I'm doing today, I know the safety department's going to write me up for a couple things I've already done. But what I'm doing today is just seeing if the magnet will lift the coil. This would have to be squared away and done much more professionally in a production manner. So those are bolted together, used electrical tape and an old glove for the insulator. But look at this. This is a whole nother animal in here. This has not worked for a couple years. Here is a wire that's off. I don't know where that goes. Now I did this. This is warm. This has got voltage going to it. So I'm going to start up the generator and see. Oops, that was terrible. This is warm, and this has got voltage to it. So I'm going to fire up the generator and see if we've got magnet. I just don't know where this went. Now I do have a blueprint, an old drawing. You know what? That maybe didn't go anywhere. I would have taped it off better if it didn't. Well, here's the first test. I don't know. I've got the generator running. I've got the magnet working. Okay, we're on top. Here's magnetize. Here's the generator taking a load. Here we go, up. How about that? Now I'm going to lower her back down. Okay, here's release. Okay, here's energize with about a 2-inch gap. That might give you an idea of it's pulling on it. Okay, I'm going to boom out a little bit. Not to see if I can drop it, but just to see what happens. I need more RPM. Wonder how, oh, there. I'm getting it to let loose a little bit. It's on that wire. Go down and see what's going on. Well, ETR Nation, this makes me think we need one of those long magnets, long and thin, to grab the whole coil at once. I've seen those. We saw one at an auction once. I'll magnetize this once more for you. We're going to see if it can pick it up from about 2 inches. Here's the magnet control switch. Coming in. I'm really excited that it worked as well as it did. It wasn't ideal, but okay, I'm done for now. So I deformed the coil a little bit, and I don't think that if we were to do that 80 times a day in the sleeting rain, that magnet is the right magnet. But see, it's round. How much surface do you really get on the coil when, if my hand is curved like the coil, there's only just the middle part of the magnet touching? So one of you guys suggested a curved piece of metal that would nestle on that. Does the magnetism go through the metal, or is it wasted on that metal? And there are long magnets, and there are magnets for rod wire. So, successful day. It's Monday evening. A great day for the ETR. Well, I'm kind of excited that that worked. Now, I did some things that electrically you probably shouldn't do, and show you a pair of vice grips in there clamping. But anyway, it really worked. The magnet worked really well. Well, ETR Nation, I'm here at the scrapyard today, and I asked them their opinion on magnets and coils. It's Tuesday. This is a week in the life of the ETR. Look at this lovely place I'm hanging out. But I also got talking to him about this machine. Now, I know this is probably scaring some of you guys because it looks pretty rough. But he said it was actually a good machine, and they parked it here They had two of them. They got rid of the other one and stopped using this one. So they're going to find a price on this for me. Look at the reach that would have. I think we could unload one rail car without having to move the car, the machine, or the four trailers. So the four trailers, two on this side, two on the other side, reach in the car, load this trailer, swing over there, load that trailer. So that's what we're doing on Tuesday. I got some advice on magnets and some ideas. So that's where I go next, is to modify the magnet to see if it can pick up the coil and support the whole coil. This machine is a M325D.
Well, as rough as that machine looked, this is what it should look like, and this is the brochure for it. So now you're starting to understand what I meant. Look at the reach on that. We would suspend a magnet off the bottom of that, and you would be able to reach in the car and then quite a ways away from the car. Now, what I want you to know is with a magnet off the bottom of that, you don't get the swinging pendulum movement that you do with a crane where a hook block is suspended by cable. So that's a huge advantage of a material handler. You can swing without getting the coil out of control. Of course, there's always a little bit of momentum that continues after you stop swinging, but it's easily controlled by the fact that you've got a good grip on it and there's very little chain involved.
Now there's an example of material loading a railroad car. That's those square bundles, bales of scrap. Now we would use a magnet a lot like that, load them up, but they'd have to bring them to us on a truck, and then we would load them in the gondola. This is an example, this is a Norfolk Southern car, of the gondolas that we'd be unloading the coil out of. Two of those machines down there working, loading rail cars. Be interesting if we could unload coil inbound and load scrap outbound. See how the cab elevates? That gives you a much better view down into the car. And that machine is a 341, Fuchs 341. The cat we're looking at is a 325. Approximately same category.
Well, ETR Nation, it's your turn to chime in. What do you think of this machine? I'm going to do an oil analysis on it, hydraulic and engine, to determine what's going on inside the pump and inside the engine. Cosmetics don't put me off as much as something like that, oil analysis telling me the pump's trashed. But I think we could buy this machine and get this job done. Put in the comments down below what you think. Think this is a mistake? Think we're on the right track? Bad pun, sorry. Think we're on the right course? Let me know down below. Thank you. So I would run this by the safety department for a final review, but the chart shows that we would be well within the capacity to bring a coil all the way around up to the bulkhead of the tractor trailer. So we could load all the way up against. Got to keep the gap out of those or the truckers get upset. But yes, it is in the load chart. I have checked that.
Okay, ETR Nation, it is Tuesday. Along with the scrap yard, I kind of wanted to visit and look at this yard, which does primarily lumber and building products. This is a transload yard on Norfolk Southern, and I would say they could do dragline mat too. Anything, it looks like they just specialize in building materials, where we would specialize in metal products. Just see, there's a car, that's a flathead, a bulkhead flat car with stacks of sheets. Looks like plywood. I can't see it from this side, but anyway, once you get geared to handle a particular type of material, your guys, your equipment, it's what you get good at. And I don't know about competing with these guys. They're established, but the metal products idea, I think, is a winner for now. While you're here, I thought you'd get a kick out of seeing this old interlocking tower. Yeah, I have got a personal protection device with me. It looks like that kind of area. I'm not going in there, but I was told up until a couple years ago that still had all the interlocking equipment in it. Here is where the Ohio Central goes north. That diamond is Norfolk Southern. There's the tower. I'll tell you what, I'd love to have an office in an old interlocking tower. I think that would be pretty neat. Maybe we'll build one like that when the yard's up and running. A week in the life of Brian includes some rail fanning. So that's why we went to look at that interlocking tower. If one's close by, you can bet I'm going to go see it. Down that way, that used to be a huge N&W yard. I mean, many tracks. Of course, it's all gone now, just one track to get through. Yep, there's shingles, where it looks like they're unloading shingles. We've talked about that. Long beams, those are laminate beams. We did a transload job one time that had laminate beams. They are long, and you got to be ready for the carrying that in one piece. They probably unloaded with 2 fork trucks, one on each end. And that would take some coordination. Well, there's the uphill into that scrapyard we were just in. That's pretty good grade on a curve. And that's down into that yard that used to be huge that isn't anymore. You know, people, things change. Some you can adapt and benefit from, and others just plain hurt. When your job goes away, your way of life goes away. Let's be overcomers. Well, I'm about to make a sales call. It's Wednesday morning. Straight ahead, never back down. Full throttle, ETR. Dig a little deeper. It's the only way I know. So we're here and we're going to make a sales call and inquire about that crane. Now, that's a locomotive crane. I know what it is and what it does, and they don't use it anymore because they don't have rail. Now, they might use it to unload tractor trailers, but not to unload rail cars anymore. So I'll get you some close-up of that and explain how they used it, and then ask them about metal transload. So let's head on in there. I may not get any footage in there, but I'll be able to explain later what they said and what I asked. Never back down. Well, this is an Ohio locomotive crane, meaning it's got a diesel engine with a generator and traction motors. So it operates like a locomotive, and it will move cars, but its specific goal was move a car into position to unload it. And what they did, they would unload and then put material alongside the tracks. They lost their rail service, so this is surplus to them. But this is not the ideal way to unload rail cars. It's the way it used to be done, but anymore it's not ideal. Here, for example, is a lot of channel that got unloaded, and or that's I-beam, looked like channel for a minute. So they would unload and put it by the tracks here. Ohio, built up in Bucyrus. That's maybe a 30-ton capacity. But it's landlocked in here and would be terrible to try and get it out of here. I did talk to them about buying steel and rail car. They say they don't move enough anymore to even buy a whole rail car. I offered to unload it and truck it to here, but that doesn't look like something that they're doing much enough anymore to do. This place used to be really big. They unloaded a lot, and things changed. You can tell kind of by the buildings. Hey, some of you that do rail in a much smaller scale than I'm doing it might find a yard like this to be a really good prototype these photos to help you in designing and building a small yard like this in a much smaller scale. A lot of pipe, and look at the weeds. You can tell how often they get in here. Well, I gathered information, but I didn't get a new customer for Transload, but always learning, always looking. Glad you're along today. Wednesday, a week in the life of the ETR.
Well, some sales calls go really well and others just kind of fall flat. This one didn't get very far. They said they just don't bring in enough steel anymore to need it brought in rail cars. So their interest in what we were doing, they were interested, but not because they would benefit by it. And then I got permission and went out and looked at the crane. Do you know what they're doing with these now? They'll put a material handling top upper on that locomotive chassis bottom lower. And because things hanging off a swinging crane aren't good for productivity. So the material handler really has changed the way things are done to the point where they'll even put them on rail and keep with the concept of being near the rail. But the new development is the articulated arm that reaches farther and has better control. This locomotive was probably built in the 80s. It's not really that old. And they told me they've got a couple people interested in it occasionally, but it's landlocked and these are hard to move. You'd have to come in and take it apart and it'd make several loads and they'd be heavy. So in fact, if you're interested in this crane, it'd be a favor to them if you would express your interest to them.
Well, ETR Nation, it's Friday afternoon and the shadows are getting long. I've got to get this little project done because Mrs. ETR and I are supposed to go dancing tonight and I don't want to booger that up. So what I'm going to do, remember how the slinky, with the magnet, I only was gripping, hang on, I'm going to switch you around here. The magnet was only gripping half of the coil and I deformed the coil. Now I don't think that this is damaged to where the customer can't use it, but I will have to explain to them what happened. And if they wanted me to, I would just pay for it. I would pay them the cost of the coil and keep it as a test unit. The Volvo's running, building up air. I've got to take this chain and rotate this thing to where I've got a piece of plate that's going to fit all the way across. We're going to see if putting a plate on there distributes the magnetic force. And I got some 2-inch plate, but we're going to try it first with a piece of 3/8 plate. There's the magnet. I've got the safety chain on. I'm about to start the generator. We're going to roll this over, get a good flat surface on the top, and see if it'll magnetize. Now, while the Volvo's building there, let me tell you what else happened today. So I called that company that I see hauling really long I-beam into their plant. It's coming from a mill. If it's coming by truck all the way from the mill, we could probably beat it with rail and transload close by. So that's a call I made today. Didn't hear back from them, but that's just the way that goes. I'm looking into a big fork truck, which is a really valuable item in a transload yard because you can pick up a lot of material off of a flat car at one time with a big fork truck. That's at an auction coming up. We're looking into that. I also am now concerned that on this job right here, the last rail move is too short to gain the advantage of rail. It may have to come from further on rail. I'll update you on that in the future. And we've got an insurance broker quoting insurance, not railroad insurance, transload insurance. So we're trying to see if that lowers the rates that we just felt like were really high for a short line. Maybe as a transload yard it'll be less. So I'll bet I've got air up now. I'll probably put you on the tripod and let you see how I flip this thing over. And then we'll see if I can get this done, prove that a plate distributes magnetism, and then go shake it, shake it, shake it. Well, the plate didn't work, so I'm going to try a big piece of angle iron. Well, that didn't work very well. And some of it's because I've got the coil deformed already, but some of them are going to come in like that. So you can't say, oh, I got to have a perfect coil every time for my lift system to work. I thought of taking that big piece of angle, cutting it in two pieces so that they laid like this under the magnet. The magnet's on top, magnetizing the body of the coil, and then these two angle would pick up the rest, magnetize on the rest. Graham is working on a scrap job where he said he's cutting this big, huge pipe apart. He said some of them are so big you can walk in them. I said, well, if you get a 50-inch diameter one, cut me a quarter of it 5 feet long, because it would be a perfect shell to fit over top of that. We would bolt it on the bottom of the magnet with some bracketry and try that. Now the other is take a rectangular piece of maybe half-inch plate and break two angles on it so it's not a radius. So the magnet is getting the full surface on your half-inch plate, and then there's two little wings bent down to distribute that along the way. But this experiment here didn't work. Back to the drawing board, back to dancing maybe. I'll have to think about that tonight while I'm dancing. How to do that. I'm due to return that coil. We've had it 2 weeks today. So I want to make sure I keep my word with them, because I would like to have this big unloading contract with them. So I need to return it, maybe talk to some magnet suppliers about how to distribute magnetism along a coil. So thanks for being here. This might wrap up a week in the life of a railroad typhoon. It's a lot of work, quite enjoyable. I enjoy accomplishing things toward a goal, and that happened this week. So I'm really enjoying this. The math and the determining if this project will work is pretty big, but all in a day's work, we're getting her done. We're going to become a steel haul and railroad. Thanks, ETR Nation.
So what I did next was I got this big piece of plate, hung it off the magnet, and my hope was that the plate would be magnetized enough to keep the ends of the coil from sagging. But what I found out was the magnetism only extends about 6-7 inches away from the magnet. I had good video of me putting spikes up to it. 12 inches from the magnet, no, it wouldn't grip. Get closer and then it would grip a little, get within 6 inches of the radius of the magnet, and it gripped really well. This is where I just kind of had fun throwing spikes in there, and the magnet would slurp them up, and it caught that chain. But I wish I had the footage of me trying that plate on top of the magnet, but you know what? It was a fail. It didn't work. And that means a curved piece of pipe that had the radius of the coil wouldn't work either. So the solution is the magnet that is 12 inches wide and 60 inches long. That's what would be needed. Let me show you a way that they use those. Pretty innovative.
Well, day in the life of, today I'm at a Ritchie Brothers auction looking at a pretty big fork truck. Now, I almost said humongous. Humongous fork truck is 25 tons, 100,000 pounds. I mean, they make some huge, like steel mill fork trucks. But as fork trucks go, this is pretty big. The reason for looking at it and the reason about thinking about buying it is to lift structural steel off flat cars. So what will it go for? I don't know. It doesn't show very well because of dings and dents and rust and issues. But I kind of like it. It's kind of calling my name. So we'll see. These auctions are always fun and interesting. This thing could go for 50 grand or it could go for 15. You just don't know. Yeah. It's got some dings and dents, but overall it's fairly square. You know what I mean by square? I mean doesn't look like somebody dropped it off a ship onto the dock. Sitting by the dock of the bay. Okay, I'm gonna look around and see what else I can find. You do notice the White Castle cup. Makes every auction go better. Caterpillar and White Castle. Well, it moves forward and reverse. Took it just a second to get its self together to move. I don't know that that's a bad sign. Looks like everything's been greased recently. I don't know that the heater would keep this cab warm in the winter. That is an absolutely mammoth crane. And I have trouble believing that the expense to assemble it brings the equivalent amount of money. I mean, that's about 6 or 7 tractor trailer loads, and putting it together probably takes 2 days. So to put it together just to take it back apart, I don't know what that'll sell for, but that's a big crane. I like a big crane like that. Just, I don't know, something manly and American and heavy lift and heavy duty, and let's do this and get her done. Well, day in the week of, I just made a sales call at this plant. They use a lot of steel and it's coming in by truck. Here's a good example of inbound loads on truck, but they got pretty excited when I talked to them about coming in by rail because of the savings. You can put 100 ton in a rail car where you can really only put 25 ton on a tractor trailer. So the savings of rail is of interest to them. Of course, it's offset by the fact that rail's not as reliable, not as quick. But another good sales call, 2 weeks in the life of East Terminal Railway. Well, I'm back at the ETR today to make sure I've made it clear how we would unload. So if there was a gondola sitting right over there, we would have to back in 4 trailers right here. Now this is in the material handling scenario. Maybe one right between the poles. If we can't get the poles out, one could go right in there, back up to the car. Another one right here, up this side of the pole. The material handler would sit in the middle, maybe at an angle a little bit like this, and then 2 trailers here. We'd have to fill in quite a bit of this and fill into the rail height, so it looked like this it would be like this over here, and then the car would sit right there. The beauty of the material handler, from right about here, you could pick coils out of the car, load that trailer, this trailer, swing this way, load this trailer, load that trailer. So almost no trailer moving, no car moving until it's unloaded. Then the 2021 would be down on that end, push the next car up, repeat the process. Loads would all come in. The Ohio Central would bring loads in. They would sit here, we would push on the way out, empties forward. So that's kind of the plan. Almost the end of the video, 2 weeks in the life of, oh, I forgot to tell you, on the way back from that sales call at the place that could use extra long structural steel, they were excited about it coming in by rail. They're going to investigate that. And between here, the ETR and their place, which is 3 or 4 miles away, I saw 3 loads of structural steel headed to their plant. So there's a lot of steel coming in. Could this area be a big storage lot and lay down yard for structural steel? Yes. Loading it back up, time for it to go home. Well, I want to thank you all. It's been an exciting 2 weeks. Auction, sales calls, magnet investigation, and this is all to take the ETR from the mindset of we're a railroad and we're going to push a couple cars around to we've got to generate traffic by being able to service customers, unloading cars, storing material, reloading it. Always called the transload yard. But that looks like the way forward. So stay in touch, comment, and like and subscribe. I don't mention that very often, but it is important because what's happening is YouTube videos are paying for the property tax while we reorganize, you might call it that, but while we got our heads wrapped around how can you buy an abandoned railroad property and then make it a business and turn a profit. So you watching, liking, subscribing is a big part of that. And again, the other day I was thinking about Patreon. I'm glad we didn't go that route. Hold my coffee and watch this. This is difficult, and I think we're on the right track. But I want your involvement and your interest to be that you watch, root for us, some pray, some send a coffee cup. But I don't want you to get much more involved than that, because if it tanks, you won't lose anything. I'm willing to gamble, but I'm not willing to gamble with your money. There, I just said it right. Thank you all. You're probably going to see the 2021 pushing gondolas full of steel. We're going to be the steel hauling short line.